May 13, 1943. Environs of Tunis, Tunisia. The scorching, gritty wind of the North African spring was all that accompanied the silence now. Just hours ago, it had been drowned out by the metallic clang of a collapsing Panzer IV, the sharp crack of American artillery, and the frantic shouted commands of exhausted men. Now, standing on the edge of a vast, defeated formation, Obergefreiter Klaus Richter, a 22-year-old infantryman from Berlin, watched the last of his company lay down their Mauser K98K rifles. The long, desperate campaign in the desert, which had promised glory and Lebensraum, had culminated in this, a slow, shuffling march into enemy custody. Klaus's uniform, once sharp field gray, was now a tattered, dust-caked monument to months of retreat. His leather boots were cracked and worn thin. He hadn't eaten a fresh meal in what felt like a lifetime. His last ration had been a handful of dry, mold-dusted hardtack biscuits and a canteen of lukewarm, chlorinated water. Looking around at the thousands of other captured German and Italian soldiers, the remnants of Rommel's Afrika Korps, a deep, crushing sense of defeat settled over him. This is it, he thought. The war is over for me. Now comes the suffering. The stories back home, the ones whispered in the barracks about Allied brutality and starvation in captivity, flashed through his mind, cold and terrifying. Instead of immediate harsh treatment, however, a strange, almost unsettling efficiency took over. They were quickly segregated, processed by young, surprisingly well-fed American MPs, military police, wearing crisp M1 helmets. The Americans spoke little German, communicating mostly through firm gestures. Within 2 days, Klaus and hundreds of others were packed shoulder to shoulder into the belly of a converted Allied transport ship, bound west. The crossing was dark, nauseating, and endless. For a week, he slept on a bare metal deck, the stench of unwashed men and salt spray filling the air. When they finally disembarked, the air was different. Cooler, cleaner. They weren't in Europe or North Africa anymore. They were in the United States of America. The docks were immense, a dizzying tangle of steel and activity. From there, they were loaded onto trains. Not the rattling, cramped boxcars of the Eastern Front, but proper passenger cars, older, perhaps, but with cushioned seating and actual windows. As the train rolled inland, the landscape changed from coastal urban sprawl to vast, unfamiliar fields. Klaus and his comrades pressed their faces against the glass, murmuring at the sight of unlimited, untouched resources, perfectly maintained roads, endless fields of corn, and towns that looked utterly untouched by war. They expected prison. They were traveling through a land of plenty. Arrival at camp and the first shock. The expectation of harsh, punitive treatment was an active fear. Yet, the train, a cushioned passenger car, was now pulling into a large compound somewhere deep in the American heartland, a place that seemed far more ordered and prosperous than the Germany they had left behind. The train hissed to a stop, and the hundreds of captured Germans spilled out onto a gravel platform. This was Camp Ruston, one of many hastily constructed but structurally sound prisoner of war (POW) camps, built by the United States across the country. The compound was surrounded by 2 high wire fences, watchtowers, and a perimeter road, confirming its purpose, yet the internal atmosphere was immediately jarring. Instead of the grim, muddy expanse Klaus had envisioned, the camp consisted of long rows of freshly painted wooden barracks. The grounds were neatly kept, and he noticed something immediately unsettling: the absence of the pervasive, acidic smell of hunger and disease that clung to every German military camp in the field. American guards, carrying M1 Garand rifles, maintained a distant, professional bearing, their demeanor one of strict adherence to regulation, not malice. Then came the first collective shock: the food. After a quick processing period, the men were marched into a large mess hall. Klaus and his comrades stood, bracing for the standard wartime fare: thin, watery soup and a sliver of stale bread. What they received instead was delivered on actual porcelain plates, not metal trays. The ration consisted of beef stew, thick and hearty, brimming with potatoes and carrots, followed by a generous slice of fresh, white bread. A soft, pliable loaf unlike the coarse, sawdust-mixed Kriegsbrot, war bread, they had eaten for years, and a mug of hot, strong coffee. Unteroffizier Ernst Müller, a tank gunner captured alongside Klaus, muttered under his breath, "They've made a mistake. This is surely the guards' meal." But no, the American sergeant standing near the entrance simply motioned them to eat quickly and move along. The bread, in particular, became an immediate focus. For men who remembered the increasing scarcity and declining quality of food back home, where even a simple potato was a luxury, the abundance was almost incomprehensible. Letters home would later describe this meal repeatedly, often focusing solely on the daily availability of fresh, baked goods. The barracks themselves, while Spartan, offered steel bunks with clean mattresses and blankets, another detail of staggering comfort compared to the makeshift bedding they had grown used to. But the true, baffling contradiction of their captivity was revealed after the evening roll call, as the sun dipped low over the unfamiliar plains of Louisiana. The movie theater and the violation of expectations. The barracks themselves, while Spartan, offered steel bunks with clean mattresses and blankets, another detail of staggering comfort compared to the makeshift bedding they had grown used to. But the true, baffling contradiction of their captivity was revealed after the evening roll call, as the sun dipped low over the unfamiliar plains of Louisiana. As the column was dismissed, a group of guards began directing the men toward a much larger, newer building near the center of the camp. Unteroffizier Muller, his face a mask of suspicion, whispered to Klaus, "Perhaps they use it for political re-education lectures." They were certain they were being led into a form of psychological torture. Instead, the doors opened into a large hall equipped with rows of benches, a raised platform, and, hanging against the far wall, a large, white screen. This was the camp's recreation hall, and among its amenities was a movie theater. The announcement, delivered in halting, heavily accented German by a young American lieutenant, stated that a showing would take place 3 times a week. That evening's feature was an American comedy, light, frivolous, and utterly disconnected from the brutal reality of the war consuming the rest of the planet. Klaus, sitting on the bench, found the experience surreal. The light flickering from the projector, the smell of burnt popcorn carried faintly on the breeze, the distant, muffled laughter of his comrades. It felt like a lifetime ago that he had done anything so utterly civilian and non-essential. The presence of this theater, this voluntary luxury, in the midst of a prisoner of war camp dedicated to incarceration, was a profound psychological blow to the Nazi doctrine they had been raised on. The ideology had promised the German soldier a world-leading culture and material prosperity under the Third Reich, while depicting the Americans as decadent, soft, and culturally impoverished. Yet, here they were, defeated German soldiers, being entertained by Hollywood in a camp where they were better fed than the civilians and sometimes even the soldiers back in their own homeland. The realization began to dawn that the image of America painted by Goebbels' Ministry of Propaganda was not only false but perhaps the exact inverse of the truth. This was not the broken, starving, industrial wasteland they had been told to expect. This was a nation so abundant, so materially secure, that it could afford to extend such amenities to its captured enemies, all while fighting a global war. The letters they began to write home, subject to strict censorship, of course, but carrying the unmistakable tone of genuine astonishment, were filled with these details. They focused not on the fighting, but on the small, almost absurd facts of camp life, the daily supply of cigarettes, the existence of a small, well-stocked canteen, run by the YMCA, and, crucially, the bakery, that produced that fresh, white bread every morning. These letters, slipping past the censors of the Wehrmacht and into the increasingly desperate homes of Germany, told an untold story of American capability and unexpected adherence to the Geneva Convention that utterly defied the official narrative. Labor, wages, and the abundance of goods. The letters they began to write home, subject to strict censorship, of course, but carrying the unmistakable tone of genuine astonishment, were filled with these details. They focused not on the fighting, but on the small, almost absurd facts of camp life, the daily supply of cigarettes, the existence of a small, well-stocked canteen, run by the YMCA, and, crucially, the bakery, that produced that fresh, white bread every morning. These letters, slipping past the censors of the Wehrmacht and into the increasingly desperate homes of Germany, told an untold story of American capability and unexpected adherence to the Geneva Convention that utterly defied the official narrative. Under the terms of the Geneva Convention, non-commissioned officers and enlisted men could be required to work. And work they did, but under conditions that again baffled the men accustomed to the brutal demands of the German war economy. Klaus Richter was assigned to a logging detail, cutting timber in the nearby forests. The work was demanding, but the pay was standardized, 80 cents per day. While this wage was not convertible to U.S. currency, it was logged as internal camp scrip, redeemable at the post exchange, PX, or canteen. Here, the true shock of American abundance manifested itself. The small camp store, operated mostly by POWs under American supervision, was stocked with items that were merely dreams back in Der Heimat: soap, high-quality tobacco, writing paper and pens, and even root beer and chocolate. For German soldiers whose families were struggling through air raids and the constant rationing of basic necessities, where a bar of decent soap was a treasured commodity, the ability to purchase these items freely, with money earned from working a reasonable 8-hour day, was a revelation. It wasn't just the existence of the goods, but the consistent supply. The shelves were always being restocked. The American war machine, which was simultaneously equipping the vast Allied armies, could also afford to dedicate the resources to maintain this internal economy for its captured enemy. Many of the POWs, including Klaus, started using their wages to pay for correspondence courses offered through the camp. They studied English, accounting, and trades. The American authorities, adhering to the Geneva Convention's focus on the humane treatment and possible rehabilitation of prisoners, provided the necessary materials. For Klaus, the long, grueling years of total war had been replaced by a structured existence that offered material comfort, safety, and ironically opportunities for self-improvement. That had vanished in Germany. This dramatic reality created deep internal conflicts. Letters home, while superficially censored, became a careful balancing act. They spoke of the good food and the warmth, using coded language and focusing on the small luxuries to reassure their worried families. They didn't dare describe the true depth of the contrast, the scale of the American war industry, or the existence of amenities like the movie theater, fearing that the truth would only invite suspicion and accusations of being traitors or worse, demoralize a nation still fighting. The POWs were living a clandestine, privileged existence that was utterly divorced from the suffering of their own country. The psychological battle and the fear of repatriation. This dramatic reality created deep internal conflicts. Letters home, while superficially censored, became a careful balancing act. They spoke of the good food and the warmth, using coded language and focusing on the small luxuries to reassure their worried families. They didn't dare describe the true depth of the contrast, the scale of the American war industry, or the existence of amenities like the movie theater, fearing that the truth would only invite suspicion and accusations of being traitors or worse, demoralize a nation still fighting. The POWs were living a clandestine, privileged existence that was utterly divorced from the suffering of their own country. As the months turned into a year, and the tide of the war continued to turn against the Axis powers, the internal conflicts within the POW population deepened. The American military adhered strictly to the .1929 Geneva Convention relative to the treatment of prisoners of war, which mandated adequate shelter, food equivalent to the detaining powers' troops in barracks, and facilities for recreation and spiritual needs. The unintended consequence of this scrupulous adherence was the creation of a nearly idyllic, safe haven for tens of thousands of German soldiers. However, the camps were not devoid of ideology. The officers' camps, in particular, often became hotbeds of fanatical Nazi loyalty, enforced by charismatic hardline Hauptmänner, captains who intimidated and sometimes even murdered prisoners suspected of collaboration or demoralization, the so-called Kriegsmüden, or war-weary. While Klaus's enlisted men's camp was generally less intense, the cultural shock still led to a slow, internal erosion of belief. For men like Klaus Richter, who had been captured early in the war, the safe, structured, and materially rich environment fostered a terrifying new fear: repatriation. As Allied victory seemed certain, the prospect of returning to a destroyed, defeated Germany, a country where everything they now considered normal, fresh bread, warm socks, a steady job, was a fantasy, filled them with dread. They understood, perhaps better than anyone still in Germany, the sheer scale of American power. They saw the endless production lines on their way to the camps, they ate the food that proved the supply chain was unbroken, and they witnessed the casual waste that signaled unimaginable abundance. This material evidence destroyed the core tenet of Nazi propaganda, that the decadent Allies lacked the resolve and resource to defeat the disciplined Reich. The irony was crushing. They were prisoners, yet they were perhaps the safest, best-fed German men in the world. Their letters continued, but the tone shifted. Instead of marveling at the amenities, they began to express subtle anxieties about the future, about the fate of Der Heimat, and about the moral and physical ruin they knew awaited them when they were finally sent home. The camp, once a fearful destination, had transformed into a reluctant, temporary refuge. The long wait and the legacy of abundance. The camp, once a fearful destination, had transformed into a reluctant, temporary refuge. The war ended in Europe in May 1945. Yet, For the tens of thousands of German POWs in America, their captivity continued. They became a strange, temporary workforce in the United States, often put to work harvesting crops like cotton and corn, supplementing the American labor force depleted by military service. This prolonged period of stable employment, regular meals, and continued access to amenities cemented the psychological disconnect between their lived experience in the US and the propaganda they had absorbed. 4. Obergefreiter Klaus Richter. The news of Germany's total surrender was met with a heavy, complex silence. There was relief that the killing was over, but profound anxiety for the state of his home city and family. His letters now focused on securing proof of their well-being, but the material conditions of his American imprisonment, clean clothes, daily fresh-baked bread, the ability to watch a movie remained untouched by the chaos of surrender. The repatriation process was slow, stretching throughout 1946 and into 1947 for many. When the time finally came for Klaus to leave Camp Rustin, he didn't feel the joyous relief of a freed man, but rather the heavy resignation of someone leaving behind a period of unexpected stability and safety. As the POWs were processed for the long voyage home, they were often stripped of their American-made uniforms and given old, British or US surplus clothing. The abundance they had grown used to vanished instantly. When Klaus finally stepped onto the ruined soil of post-war Germany, the reality was a brutal confirmation of his worst fears: rubble, starvation, and a population that looked skeletal and defeated. He was no longer just a German soldier. He was a German soldier who had spent years in a land of plenty. The memories of the movie theater, the canteen stocked with chocolate, and the simple luxury of a daily fresh loaf of bread became not just anecdotes, but stark measuring sticks for the complete failure and devastation wrought by the Reich. These former prisoners, returning from American captivity, carried with them a silent, powerful testimony of personal, undeniable contrast that would subtly, but profoundly, influence the post-war perception of America among the populace. The untold story of the American POW camps was one of adherence to international law and material capability that served as a powerful, peaceful weapon against the Nazi ideology, revealing the dramatic difference between the two nations' wartime realities.